Hello, and welcome to this quick writing tip from the Writer's Mindset with me, Christina Adams. We're on a break for the month of July, and we'll be back in August for interview season. We'll be talking to the likes of Sacha Black, Nicholas Herrick, and many more amazing indie authors and writers, so stay tuned for that. If you'd like to hear more from us in the meantime, why not come and hang out in our free Facebook group? You can meet other writers, troubleshoot, and find inspiration. If you type writerscookbook.com/Facebook group into your browser, it'll automatically redirect you.
You can support The Writer's Mindset over on Patreon, where you'll get to listen to early episodes, check out bonus content, get a podcast shout out, and nab yourself exclusive discounts. We've got several pricing tiers available depending on what you're looking for, and they start at just £1 a month. You can find out more by visiting patreon.com/writers mindset.
And finally, my latest book, The Ghost Call, is out now. Reviews that have come in so far are amazing. Thank you so much if you left one of them. Everyone is loving how it's written from both the mother and daughter's points of view. Think of The Ghost Call as like Gilmore Girls, but with ghosts. It's available now on Amazon, Apple, Kobo, all the usual sites. You can find it under my pen name, KC Adams. Now, on with the show.
When I did my dissertation back in 2014, I had to write up to 14,000 words of creative writing, and I chose to write a novella about the Lebensborn Project. And if you haven't heard of it and you're interested in history, I'd highly recommend giving that a Google because it's completely fascinating and utterly horrifying. And that's why I chose to write about it. But as I started to work on it more and more, my dissertation tutor kept saying, "You need a plan, you need a plan," and I kept resisting. And I ended up creating a plan mostly just to pacify him, but it was kind of a half-assed plan. It was just a very boring list of this happens and this happens and this happens, but I didn't know how, I didn't know why, I didn't really have a lot of detail in it, and because of that, my novella suffered. And I still now, even 6 years later, I think the weakest part of my novella was the fact that the ending was just rubbish, because I didn't know where I was taking this character, what journey she was going on, even though the actual opening of it was really interesting, because you found out she was kidnapped as a baby and she never knew. You know, that's got a lot of potential there, but because of the nature of the Lebensborn Project, she was never going to find out who her real parents were, and so it kind of felt like I dug myself into a hole. And had I planned out my story a little bit more before I started writing, things could have turned out very differently, and I certainly had the time. You know, I had this idea for my dissertation before I even started my MA, but I didn't give the plan time to form or the story time to develop, and because of that, I ended up a little bit disappointed in the end product, if I'm being completely honest, even though I absolutely loved the concept of the story, and because of that, I've not been back to it, no matter how much my dissertation tutor wanted me to. It wasn't until I was working on What Happens in New York in 2015, 2016 that I realised how important a plan is. And I say that because I have 4 main characters and I have about 15 odd books in this universe. And in order for me to make sure I don't write myself into a hole and for me to not contradict myself, I need some sort of plan, because there is no way I can keep all of that information in my head. You know, I don't have a great memory at the best of times, so trying to memorise what's happening to all these different characters at different times in their lives over the course of about 10 years is nigh on impossible. And so I started planning. And the first book that I planned properly was actually my second novel, What Happens in London. And from then on, I've adapted and I do a slightly different system for every book, because you need different things depending on what genre you're writing and what your goals are. But I would never be able to write as fast as I do if I didn't have a plan. Planning is everything. It's your character descriptions, it's your story, it's your world building, whereas plotting is purely knowing how your characters get from point A to point B to point C, etc. I think both are important. You certainly need world building regardless of what genre you're writing in, because if you think about, even if you're writing women's fiction, for example, like I do, you still need your own pop culture references, you need the workplace your characters come from, You need the places they go and hang out, whether they're based in real places or in somewhere that you've made up. You need to know that information, and you need to be able to find it really easily so that you don't dig yourself into a hole or forget something. And the other benefit of planning is that it makes editing a lot faster. And I actually know someone who does maybe one round of editing on his books and that's it, because he plans in so much depth, he doesn't need that much editing. And it makes his life so much easier because he absolutely detests editing, but he loves planning. So it works perfectly for him. There is a misconception that planning is the least creative part of the writing process, but it's actually the most creative because it's where you're bringing your characters to life, and it's where you're developing this world and you're coming up with a completely new story that's never been told before. There's nothing more creative than that. You know, the creativity isn't in the writing itself, it is in the stuff that comes before it. And, you know, I used to really hate planning when I first started out. I just saw it as a necessary evil. And actually, the more I do it, the more I plan. And I've now got so many stories planned out, and I need to write faster, basically, so that I can keep up with them. Because otherwise, I'm just going to have so many plans and not enough stories written. Have a plan. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. You know, if the thought of having something very rigid terrifies you, don't do it. Instead, just know where you want your characters to start and where you want them to end up. And that, I find, is really motivating, because if you've got a romance and you know that these two characters are coming back to each other after being apart for 5 years, and you want them to get there happily ever after, if you really care about those characters, you'll keep coming back to them and find a way to make their relationship work, but also to add in enough conflict to your story that it's interesting to the reader.